After 3 years with Chloe, I was done. A car crash had left her with irreversible damage to her corneas. The doctor said she would most likely go blind. After thinking it over and over, I decided that now was the best time to break up with her. It was to compensate her for the years she'd spent with me, and to make sure she wouldn't try to find me again. I took out my entire life savings, $75,000. I told her, "You're going blind. Do me a favor and stop clinging to me like a lost puppy." 7 years later, she was a celebrated, A-list actress, admired by millions. An interviewer asked her, "Have you ever had a love that was truly unforgettable?" She shook her head firmly. "No, but I do have a hatred so deep it feels like it's in my bones. A hatred that makes me want to kill him with my own hands." The snow was coming down in thick, silent flakes. I stubbed out my cigarette, tossed it and the empty pack into a trash can, then brushed the accumulating snow from my shoulders and walked into the hospital. I was here to break up with my girlfriend, Chloe, and I had brought all my savings with me. $75,000. A severance package for the 3 years she'd given me. It should be enough. After all, I was the one who took care of her all these years. She hadn't really given anything. I hoped we could part on good terms. On the 12th floor of the inpatient wing, Chloe's room was directly across from the nurse's station. A young nurse at the station saw me and teased, "Back to see your girlfriend, Ethan? No flowers today." I tried to force a smile but couldn't manage it, so I just gave a polite nod. I stood outside her door for a few moments, letting the chill leave my body. A few minutes later, I pushed the door open and stepped quietly inside. Chloe was standing by the window looking out. Hearing me, she turned, her voice full of joy. "Ethan, you're here." Her face had several deep scrapes, just beginning to heal under pinkish-brown scabs. A large patch of her hair had been shaved and was now wrapped in thick gauze. Her exposed forearms were covered in large, dark bruises. More injuries were hidden beneath the loose-fitting hospital gown. These were all from the car crash a week ago. The hit-and-run driver had dragged her for a dozen yards, tearing away a patch of her scalp. She had a fractured left shoulder blade, multiple contusions, and severe abrasions all over her body. But the worst of it was her eyes. The impact had caused irreversible damage to her corneas. The doctor said she would almost certainly go blind. He told me they would try conservative treatment for a while, but if there was no improvement, a corneal transplant was her only hope for recovery. Looking at this girl smiling so sweetly, her once bright eyes now clouded over, I could tell she couldn't focus on me. To her, I was probably just a blurry shape. I suddenly found myself unable to speak. How could I break up with her now, injured from the crash and on the verge of losing her sight? But running from it wouldn't help. I had to face this day eventually. When I didn't answer, Chloe started to shuffle towards me. Her vision was so poor that she reached out for things to steady herself as she moved. I had to rush forward to catch her. The moment I took her arm, I felt her whole body relax into my touch. She started to wrap her arms around me, then she wrinkled her nose, sniffing my jacket. "Ethan, you smell like smoke. Have you been smoking?" I wanted to tell her, "Yes, I have," but instead I said, "Of course not. I must have picked it up from someone in the hallway downstairs." We were about to break up. There was no point in starting a fight. I looked at her in the thin hospital gown and asked, my voice sharp with feigned anger, "Why aren't you in bed? You shouldn't be wandering around when you can barely see, always causing trouble for everyone." Thank God these days were almost over. She whined playfully, "I'm so tired of lying in bed. The nurse said it's snowing, and my vision is getting worse every day. I want to see as much of the world as I can now, before I can't even see the blurry shapes anymore." My chest tightened as if a knife was twisting in it, making it hard to breathe. A frustrated curse escaped me. "You're a fool." She hugged me tightly, just like she had 1,000 times before, nuzzling her head against my cheek. But instead of her usual light, clean scent, all I could smell was the thick odor of medicinal ointment. The smell made me gag, a wave of nausea rising in my throat. I shoved her away from me. Chloe froze, staring at me as I gagged, completely bewildered. Panic filled her beautiful, vacant eyes. "Ethan, what's wrong?" she asked. It took a long moment for the nausea to subside. I tilted my head back, took a deep breath, and let it out slowly to steady myself. I reminded myself why I was here. I dug my fingernails into my palms, crushing the storm of emotion inside me, forcing my voice to be flat and cold. "Chloe, the doctor said you're going to be blind. You know that, right?" Her expression darkened, and she nodded miserably. "They still haven't caught the driver who hit you, so there's no one to pay your medical bills, right?" Her lips trembled and her face fell. She looked down and began to pick at her fingers, a nervous habit of hers. She always did that when she was extremely anxious. I pulled the debit card from my pocket and pressed it into her hand. This is my entire savings. $75,000. For your treatment. The pin is your birthday. No, I can't take this. Chloe shook her head frantically, hiding her hands behind her back, refusing the card. Just listen to me, I said, raising my voice. I grabbed her hand and forced the card into her palm. I made my voice as hard and cold as I could. You take this money and from now on, we're through. We go our separate ways. She stopped struggling, completely frozen. The dim, hazy light filtering through the snow-dusted window made her small frame look fragile and broken. With her back to the light, her face was ashen, her expression lost. After a long silence, she forced a small, brittle laugh, tears already streaming from her eyes. Ethan, I don't understand what you mean. I cut her off coldly. You're not a child. What's not to understand? It means we're breaking up. From this moment on, we have nothing to do with each other. But why? She was on the verge of breaking down, but she bit her lip, trying desperately to hold it together. Unstoppable tears streamed down her face, tracing paths over her healing scrapes. I couldn't bear to look at her, so I turned away. A sharp pain shot through my stomach from the emotional stress, and I doubled over, pressing my hand hard against it. My voice was raw as I forced out the words, because I don't want a disabled girlfriend. Chloe acted as if she hadn't heard me. She fumbled her way over to me, grabbing my arm with a worried expression. Ethan, what's wrong? Is it your stomach again? She leaned in closer, trying to get a better look at my face. Seeing her face, filled with nothing but concern and worry for me, I felt my resolve waver. Was I making a mistake? But I quickly pushed the thought away. I had to make a clean break. The sooner this was over, the better. I yanked my arm from her grasp, my face a mask of disgust. I've made myself perfectly clear. What part don't you understand? The doctor said you're going blind. Do you really think I'm going to marry a blind woman? The vicious look on my face must have terrified her. She stared for a second, then broke into wounded sobs. Ethan, what is wrong with you? Don't you want me anymore? I scowled and nodded firmly. That's right. That $75,000 is your severance pay. You can use it to fix your eyes. Maybe there's still hope for them. Crying, she shook her head and threw herself against my chest, wrapping her arms tightly around my waist. I don't want to break up, and I don't want your money. I don't believe you could be this cruel. We had nothing back then, and you never left me. I could feel her body trembling, and a pang of pain went through me. We had been together for so long, after all. I had watched her grow from a young girl into the beautiful woman she was today. I never wanted things to get this ugly. I grabbed her thin arms, pried her off me through gritted teeth, and gave her a push. I just wanted to put some distance between us, but she lost her balance and crumpled to the floor. Fine. This would help me seem even more heartless. I stared down at her on the floor. Get out, and stop following me around like a stray dog. You were just like a stray dog when I found you 7 years ago, following me everywhere. I took you in, I paid for your school. What now? You're going blind and you expect me to let you drag me down for the rest of my life. Well, I'm done being a sucker. I'm telling you to get lost. Do you understand? This isn't a discussion. It's a notification. Chloe sat collapsed on the floor, her vacant eyes wide with shock, her body trembling uncontrollably. A moment later, a gut-wrenching sob broke from her, a sound like the broken cry of a wounded animal. Each of her cries was a blade stabbing into me, until the pain turned to numbness. Overwhelmed with shame, I couldn't listen anymore and stumbled out of the room. As I closed the door, I heard a cry of pure despair from behind me. Ethan, please, don't go. I left anyway. If I had stayed to comfort her, the breakup would have failed. She would have used it as an excuse to cling to me. A breakup had to be clean. She still had a lot of things at my apartment, so I planned to move them into a place I'd rented for her. It took me until the following afternoon to move all of her things, trip after trip. I was exhausted. I had no intention of seeing Chloe again. I knew I was in the wrong, and I couldn't handle seeing her cry. So, I called Chloe's best friend, Maya, and asked if she could hold on to the new lease and keys for Chloe until she got out of the hospital. I arranged to meet Maya at a coffee shop. Before I left, I cleaned myself up so I'd look sharp and untroubled. But I waited for a long time and Maya never came. I stared into the glass of water the waitress had brought me. Miss, I'd like that piece of mousse cake. A bright, clear voice drew my gaze to the counter. Seeing the small figure with a high ponytail, I felt a momentary daze. She looked so much like Chloe as a little girl. My mind drifted back in time. I was the one who found Chloe. I was 16 and she was 13. I was an orphan. As it happened, so was she. But her situation was different from mine. Much more tragic, you could say. My parents had died from carbon monoxide poisoning from a faulty gas heater one winter. I was away at a dorm, so I survived. My parents were gone, but they left me their small, 2-bedroom house. Their jobs, taking pity on me, gave me a small life insurance payout. Social services covered my public school fees. Life was tough, but I managed. Chloe's parents had been prominent people in our town. They owned a large factory, but a string of bad luck led to their business failing, leaving them with massive debts. Creditors were at their house and the factory every day, splashing paint on the walls and shouting threats. In the end, unable to take the pressure, her parents climbed to the roof of their factory and jumped. Their house and cars were auctioned off, and loan sharks stripped the factory of its equipment. And Chloe was left with nowhere to go. The day I found her, it was snowing heavily, just like today. She was shivering in a thin, long-sleeved shirt and flimsy slippers, standing under the bright security light of a closed convenience store. I was a freshman in high school, walking home from a late study session. That's when I saw her, hugging herself and crying, her hair and face covered in snow. So I took her home and made her a bowl of ramen. From that day on, I had a little sister. It wasn't that I wanted to. I could barely take care of myself back then. I didn't have the energy to look after a kid. But every time I took her to her aunt's house, she'd run away and be back at my door within the hour. She would just stand there, looking up at me with those big, tear-filled eyes. How could I say no to that? And from then on, she became a permanent, wonderful complication in my life. In truth, looking back, those years with Chloe were happy ones. For a few years after my parents died, I felt like a forgotten kid, left in a corner. My dad's parents were already gone, and my mom's family wanted nothing to do with me. I went to my grandparents' house a few times, but my aunt would slam things around in my presence while my grandmother just sighed. Even though I was only 12, I understood I wasn't welcome. I never went back after that, until Chloe came along and I had a family again. I was a freshman in high school. She was in 7th grade. Every morning, I'd make her breakfast, wake her up, and bike her to school. She didn't have late classes, so she'd come home, buy groceries, make dinner, and always save a plate for me for when I got back. To save money, we'd often pick up the leftover vegetables the grocers were throwing out at the market. Mr. Henderson, the butcher, would sell us his leftover cuts for cheap. We lived like that for 3 years. The year she started at my old high school, I went off to college. I chose a good local university so I could come home on weekends to help her with her homework. Of course, there was another, more secret reason I was reluctant to admit. I had fallen in love with Chloe. I had fallen in love with the girl who saw me as her brother. I was ashamed of myself for feeling this way, but I couldn't control my heart. But I didn't want to ruin what we had. When you love a flower, you can just watch it bloom. It doesn't have to be yours. There was a kind of happiness in just being there to see it happen. That's what I thought at the time. But at some point, Chloe's attitude towards me began to change. It started with what she called me. She stopped calling me by a nickname and started calling me Ethan. I told her it was too formal, and she'd just pout and glare at me. Then later, she started calling me Ethan, but in a way that sounded different, more affectionate. I tried to correct her a few times, but she wouldn't stop, so I just let it go. As long as she was happy, I didn't care. It was winter break, during the first snow of the season. We were walking home together after buying groceries. The warm, yellow glow of the streetlights illuminated her face, catching the swirling snowflakes. She looked like an angel. The moment felt so perfect, so unreal, that something slipped out before I could stop it. She stopped walking and stared at me, her face a mask of shock. "What did you just say?" Seeing her flushed face snapped me back to reality, and I quickened my pace, practically running away. "Ethan, stop. What did you say?" "I want you to say it again," Chloe shouted, jogging to catch up. What had I said? I had said, "Chloe, I love you." My head was spinning with the memory. Even though I'd broken up with Chloe, you can't just turn off years of feelings. A profound sense of loss washed over me, a feeling that a vital part of my life was now missing. Thankfully, Maya arrived. Her arrival broke me out of my troubling thoughts. I had just stood up to greet her when she slapped me hard across the face. The force of it made my head spin and my ears ring. "Ethan, you're an animal. How could you break up with Chloe when she needs you most? You're not even human." Her eyes were filled with tears, her jaw clenched in rage. I took a deep breath to steady myself. Noticing people staring, I didn't want to cause a scene, so I gestured for her to sit down. Maya sat down resentfully, her arms crossed, glaring at me as if she wanted to kill me. I handed her the lease and the key to the apartment I had rented for Chloe. She glanced at them and sneered. What? Kicking her out on the street now, are you? Not even leaving her a place to live. I should have known what you really were. And I actually thought you were good to her. You bastard. I felt a pang of guilt and didn't have the courage to defend myself. I just said, Maya, I rented this place for her for 3 years. I've already moved all of her things in. She just stared at me, looking me up and down without a word. I continued, I'm leaving town soon, going to start a business with a friend in another state. She's in the hospital and she might need that transplant surgery soon. Can you please make sure you're there for her? Maya's intense stare made my skin crawl. I couldn't even bring myself to meet her eyes. She said, Chloe and I are best friends. I don't need you to tell me to take care of her. Unlike you, I don't run away when things get tough. You make me sick. Look, I wanted to say more, to ask her about Chloe's post-surgery care. But Maya stood up, picked up my glass of water, and poured it over my head. When the glass was empty, she slammed it back on the table and shouted, Ethan, save your self-pitying act. I'm not Chloe. If you're going to leave, then get lost for good. Don't you ever show your face to her again, or I swear I'll slap you every time I see you. The only reason I even came here was to do this for her. The sight of you is disgusting. You're a coward, so go hide in your shell forever. I'll take care of her. We don't need you. With that, she stormed out. I stared after her, lost in thought. The other people in the cafe were staring at me, their judgmental eyes seeming to peer into my filthy soul. It didn't matter. I was leaving town soon anyway. What they thought of me meant nothing. I would have a new beginning. I walked out of the coffee shop into the cold air, which made me shiver. The snow had started falling again. There had been so much snow this year, storm after storm, as if trying to blanket the whole world in white. Before I left the city for good, I spent a few days revisiting all the places Chloe and I used to go. A final memorial for a love that was now dead. I've always been one for ceremony, but just thinking about her still made my heart ache. But it would be okay. Time heals all wounds. We would both get used to a life without the other. Finally, the day of my departure arrived. I felt a mix of excitement and reluctance. In the end, I just let go, waving goodbye to the girl I was leaving behind in my past. Goodbye, Chloe. I'm gone now. You have to live a good life on your own. 7 years later, in a brightly lit television studio, Chloe was on a popular talk show with the cast of her new fantasy series to promote its release. During a rapid-fire question segment, the host turned to Chloe. Chloe, have you ever experienced a love in your own life as profound and unforgettable as the one in the show? Chloe paused for a beat, then shook her head with a firm smile. Love? No, not really. But I do have a hatred so deep it feels like it's in my bones. A hatred that makes me want to kill him with my own hands. The veteran host, sensing a story, immediately seized on her words. He clearly wasn't going to pass up a chance to dig into a famous actress's past for the sake of ratings. He pressed on. So deep? Does that mean he was a real jerk? Someone who hurt you so badly you still can't forget it? Or, to look at it another way, is it possible to hate someone that much only because you once loved them just as deeply? Chloe suddenly fell silent. The moment became awkward. One of her younger co-stars quickly jumped in to break the tension. Chloe might not have a great love story, but I do. Let me tell you all about. He then launched into a story about his numerous flings from middle school through college. The host had to signal him several times before he finally stopped talking. But ever since the host's questions, Chloe had seemed distant and distracted. She was so out of it that during the game segment, her team kept losing points. Everyone could tell something was wrong. As the show wrapped up, the host went into his usual closing, wishing the new series success and asking the audience to tune in. Just then, Chloe suddenly lifted her microphone to her lips and looked at the host. Her expression was serious as she said a single word. Yes. That night, it was the top trending topic on every social media platform. Hashtag Chloe hates him because she loved him. Hashtag Chloe admits to unforgettable past love. Hashtag Chloe says yes. The autumn night was heavy with dew, the air filled with the sound of crickets. Chloe sat curled up on a sofa on the balcony of her villa, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders, sipping red wine. She looked frighteningly thin, as if the darkness might swallow her whole. She put down her glass and stared at her phone. The screen opened to an unsent iMessage. The draft read, Ethan, if you came back right now, got on your knees and begged for my forgiveness, maybe even slapped yourself a few times, I might consider forgiving you. It was a number she knew by heart but hadn't dialed once in 7 years. After finishing half the bottle, she closed her eyes and took a deep breath. As if making a momentous decision, her trembling finger tapped the send button. As soon as the message was sent, she started picking at her fingers again. It was a habit she'd had since she was a child. Ethan used to see her doing it and would take her hand in his, and the warmth of his palm always calmed her down. She picked up her phone, then set it down again. Over and over. Hours passed, and she grew more and more agitated. He wasn't answering. He really wasn't answering. Furious, she picked up the phone and dialed the number. After a few rings, a sleepy woman's voice answered. Hello? Who is this? Chloe froze. Was this his wife? His girlfriend? Of course. The heartless bastard had moved on. She was still stuck in the past while he had already found someone new. Chloe's voice was sharp with anger. I'm looking for Ethan Miller. The woman on the other end paused. Ma'am, I think you have the wrong number. I don't know an Ethan Miller. Then she hung up. Chloe stared at the disconnected call on her screen, feeling like she was about to fall apart. How could he just break up with her and disappear? How could he just walk away so easily, without a second thought? She dialed again. The woman answered, her voice impatient. Look, do you know what time it is? I already told you, I don't know any Ethan Miller. Chloe was tongue-tied, unsure of what to say. The woman sighed, her tone softening slightly. Listen, maybe the guy you're looking for had this number before me. I got a few calls for him years ago. For some reason, hearing that made Chloe feel a small sense of relief. It meant this woman wasn't with him. She felt a pang of guilt. I'm so sorry to bother you. Can I just ask one last question? How long have you had this number? The woman thought for a second. About 6 years now, I think. Then she hung up. 6 years. Right after they broke up, he had changed his number. Chloe gave a bitter laugh. A man who's fallen out of love truly is the cruelest thing. She had kept the same number for 7 years, just in case he ever tried to find her. She tilted the bottle back and finished the last of the wine in one long swallow. Drunk and curled in a corner of the sofa, she mumbled to herself. Ethan, how could you be so cruel? How could you just disappear for all these years? I'm a star now. I have so much money. See? I'm not the girl who would have been a burden to you anymore. So why won't you come back? Even just as friends. Even if I had to see you with someone else. Just let me see your face one more time. Is that too much to ask? She started to cry, but the only answer was the mournful sound of the wind whipping across the balcony. After Chloe became a star, the same relatives who had once avoided her like the plague all came crawling back. They all had excuses for their past behavior. They said their incomes were too tight, that they couldn't afford to take in a teenager. Besides, she came with her parents' debts, and the loan sharks were always coming around. Something about the sins of the father. She would just nod, not bothering to argue, and have her assistant give them a few $1,000s to make them go away. She considered it charity. They were family, but they could also become a liability in the press. As a public figure, she couldn't afford the negative press they might generate. And besides, as they said, everyone has their own problems. She couldn't force them to take her in. All of them, that is, except for her aunt. When her aunt heard that other relatives were getting money from her, she started coming around too. Chloe always had her assistant turn her away at the door. She would never forget being 13 years old, just after her parents had died. Her aunt, her mother's only sister, had looked at her with such contempt. When Chloe's family was wealthy, they had helped her aunt constantly. Her parents had even bought her aunt's house and car. But after the tragedy, her aunt's family treated Chloe like she was toxic. With no other immediate family, Child Protective Services had to persuade her aunt to reluctantly take her in. She was 13 that year and had started going through puberty. She noticed her underwear would sometimes go missing. Then one day, she walked in on her uncle handling it. She was mortified and furious, but she didn't know who to tell, so she kept it to herself. Later, her uncle grew bolder, touching her whenever her aunt wasn't home. She tearfully told her aunt what was happening, but instead of confronting her husband, her aunt called her a little slut and accused her of trying to seduce him. She screamed, trying to defend herself, but her aunt just slapped her twice across the face and threw her out of the house. It was snowing heavily that day, but she was only wearing a thin shirt and the flimsy cartoon slippers her parents had bought her. She wandered aimlessly down the street, getting covered in snow. A group of guys started whistling at her, and she ran in a panic to the front of a convenience store. There were security cameras and people inside. The guys left. She just stood there as the snow piled up, as the streetlights came on, and as the owner finally closed the store for the night. She was so cold and hungry she was about to pass out. And that's when he appeared. Ethan. He stopped his bike, planting one foot on the ground, and asked with concern, "Hey little girl, why are you out here all by yourself? Where are your parents?" Chloe looked up at the boy in front of her. His blue and white school jacket was dusted with white. Snowflakes clung to his messy hair and landed on the tip of his nose, melting instantly from the warmth of his breath. He had such kind eyes, bright as stars, and the snowflakes clinging to his long eyelashes made him look almost angelic. She didn't answer his question. She just said in a small, pitiful voice, "I'm hungry." And so, the boy gave her a ride home on his bike. He made her a bowl of ramen. It was the best bowl of ramen she had ever had in her life. The next morning, hungover, Chloe put back on her public face, the glamorous, confident, powerful actress. But inside, the ache was still there. Ever since the host had accidentally picked at that old wound, one question had been tormenting her. Where was he? Where in the world was he? She asked Maya, who just called her a lovesick fool for still thinking about such a heartless bastard. She went to her old neighborhood, but everyone just wanted to tell her how successful she was, invite her to dinner, and take a picture with her. She even found Mr. Henderson, the old butcher, who remembered Ethan fondly as a good, loyal kid. But no one could tell her where he was. A sudden, nameless panic began to set in. She couldn't sit still. She canceled all of her engagements and, with her assistant, began to search for Ethan Miller. But it was the same story everywhere she went. No one knew where he was. No one had seen him. It was as if he had died. Dead? The thought terrified Chloe. Her chest tightened, and she couldn't breathe. No, it wasn't possible. If he had gotten sick or died in an accident, surely someone would know. Chloe told herself this over and over. She started going through the boxes of old things she'd kept all these years, the things Ethan had moved into that apartment for her. She remembered when Maya had taken her there for the first time, cursing Ethan's name the whole way, calling him a scumbag, a bastard, wishing him a painful death. Her vision had started to recover by then, and when she saw the cozy little apartment, she couldn't help but cry. It was a clean, one-bedroom place that faced south, filled with warm sunlight. Everything was decorated in her favorite colors, and even the sheets on the bed had her favorite cartoon characters on them. Rummaging through a box, she found the old lease agreement. She turned to the last page and saw his signature. Staring at his clean, flowing handwriting, a tear fell onto the paper. She quickly wiped it away with her sleeve, gently tracing the letters of his name. On the other side was the landlord's signature and phone number. She dialed the number. She met with the landlord, or rather, the real estate agent. They met at a bookstore cafe. The agent, a middle-aged woman, was thrilled to be meeting Chloe and spent the first 10 minutes taking selfies with her before finally settling down. Chloe smiled and played along patiently. Once they were settled, Chloe handed her the old lease and asked if she remembered a client named Ethan Miller. The agent nodded. "Ethan, sure. I've known that kid since he was little. Haven't seen him in years, though." Chloe's face fell. "When he rented the apartment, was he okay? Did you ever hear if he was sick?" The agent thought for a moment, then shook her head. "I don't think so, but that was right after your accident, you know. He listed his family's house with me to sell." Chloe's head snapped up. The woman continued, "You know that house? It's in an older neighborhood, but it's zoned for a great elementary school. Could have sold for much more, but he only asked for $75,000 because he was in a hurry and needed cash. I told him to wait for a better offer, but he wouldn't listen." Chloe thought of the debit card Ethan had given her. $75,000. It was the money from selling his house? He had given her all the money from the sale. With no house and no money, how did he survive? How did he survive? Chloe murmured to herself. The agent didn't seem to hear her and just kept talking. "After he sold the house, he came back to me to rent a place. That one, the one you're holding the lease for. I must have shown him a dozen places. He was so picky. This one didn't have enough light, that one was in a bad neighborhood. I was about to give up on him. If I hadn't known him since he was a kid, I would have told him to find another agent." The woman finished her story with a smile and took a sip of her coffee. "When we finally found this one, he was so happy with it. He insisted on a 3-year lease and paid the entire amount up front. I told him he could just pay for 6 months at a time, but it was like he didn't even hear me. Such a silly kid." The woman chuckled at the memory. Chloe's hands were shaking. She fumbled in her purse, pulled out a handful of cash, and threw it on the table. Then she shot up from her chair and fled the cafe. She left the agent staring after her in stunned silence. Chloe posted the same message to all of her social media accounts. Searching for Ethan Miller, age 30, graduate of Springfield High School. Please contact me with any information. Substantial reward offered. The post caused a huge fight between Chloe and her agency. Her agent said she was being reckless, that if her rivals got a hold of this, they could use it to destroy her career, and she'd be on the hook for millions from her endorsement deals. But Chloe didn't care. Seeing the determination on her face, her agent relented. She had managed Chloe for years. The girl was a professional, always on time, always prepared, and in all her years in the spotlight, she'd never had a single scandal or a piece of bad press. Compared to her other clients, Chloe was a dream. At least she was only looking for someone. She hadn't said who he was to her. Thanks to Chloe's fame and the buzz around her new show, the post got a massive amount of attention. A photo of Ethan Miller started circulating online. Soon, tips started trickling in. Someone claiming to be a college classmate said he thought Ethan had stomach cancer. He'd seen him taking pills during their final thesis defense, and Ethan had brushed it off as just for an upset stomach. But the classmate said his own father had died of stomach cancer a few years prior, and he recognized the medication. Someone else, a friend, said Ethan had talked to him about donating his body to science and had been looking up information about it online. And a nurse wrote in. She said she'd been an intern at the hospital when Chloe had her accident. She told Chloe that she often saw Ethan just outside her room, doubled over in pain. All the clues pointed to one thing: he had been seriously ill. She suddenly remembered that last year he had lost so much weight so quickly. He was always complaining about stomach pain, always taking medicine in secret. She had been so worried, but he had just laughed it off, blaming it on the stress of graduating and finding a job. The signs had been there all along. 2 weeks later, Chloe learned the whole truth. The man named Ethan Miller was dead. He had died 7 years ago. A medical student saw the photo online and said it looked exactly like one of the cadavers they had studied in his anatomy class. He said they had all felt sad about it at the time, because the man had been so young and handsome. Chloe went to the medical school and told the administrator she was Ethan's sister. The administrator bowed to her deeply, then led her to Springfield Memorial Cemetery. He explained that after 3 years of serving the students, Mr. Miller's remains had been cremated and interred there. Ethan wasn't alone. He was surrounded by the graves of others who had also donated their bodies to science. His gravestone had no photo, just an inscription from the medical school. He gives in death what he gave in life. The plot was neatly kept. Chloe sat down on the grass beside the stone. The administrator saw she needed a moment and quietly left. Chloe stared at the gravestone, her eyes dry. Perhaps she had already cried all her tears over the past 7 years. She gently stroked the cold stone. "Ethan, you did all this just so I would move on, didn't you? Well, don't worry. I have a new life. I'm a big star now, surrounded by handsome men. I don't think about you at all. I'll live a good life. I'll love myself. After all, that's what you wanted." There's a song I've been listening to a lot lately. It's called "A Little Red Flower." I want to play it for you. She took out her phone and played the song that had given her so much strength during her darkest, most hopeless moments. Here's a little red flower for you, to pin on the new branch you grew yesterday. A reward for the courage it took, for you to come and talk to me. He deserved that little red flower. Chloe, the goddess of the silver screen, had a career that spanned 3 decades, entirely free of scandal. She never married. And that old clip of her on the talk show, the one where she answered, yes, was replayed by entertainment news sites every few years, fueling speculation that she'd spent her life unable to let go of someone from her past. That winter, Chloe fell gravely ill. She suddenly lost the will to fight. She murmured to herself, "Ethan, I really can't do this anymore. I'm so tired. I want to give up. Please don't be mad at me." She had already made her final arrangements. She asked her assistant to have her buried in Springfield Memorial Cemetery. She couldn't be buried with him, but she could be near him. 2 days later, she slipped into a coma. In her delirium, a sweet, girlish smile spread across her face, and she whispered, "Ethan." Perhaps, in her dreams, they were finally together again. Crystal snowflakes, like scattered pear blossoms, began to fall. It was the first snow of another year. Epilogue: Ethan, I was a bastard. My girlfriend was in the hospital after a car crash, about to go blind, and that's when I chose to break up with her. But I had to, even though it felt like my heart was being ripped out of my chest, like my entire world was collapsing around me. What choice did I have? If I didn't leave then, I'd have to leave soon enough anyway. Leaving later would only cause her more pain and waste more of her life. What was the point? My stomach cancer was stage 4. I had begged the doctors to save me, but they just sighed and shook their heads. In truth, if it weren't for Chloe, I would have had nothing to live for anyway. But with her in my life, even the ants on the sidewalk seemed precious. I didn't want to die. When I was first diagnosed, I fought it. I went through the treatments, but after 6 months of fighting, I was given my death sentence. Then last week, Chloe had her accident, and the damn driver fled the scene. My savings were almost gone from my own medical bills, so I put my parents' old house on the market for a quick sale. It was an old house, but in a good location. It was valued at much more, but I listed it for just $75,000 cash only. Chloe was definitely going to need a corneal transplant, but for a regular patient like her, with no money or connections, the waiting list could be years long. I took my own diagnosis to her doctor and filled out the paperwork to be a directed donor for her corneas. My life was ending anyway. What difference would a few days make? I would have gladly given my life for her. The thought that my corneas would allow her to see again filled me with a profound joy. I donated the rest of my body to science, too. That way, I wouldn't have to worry about being an unclaimed corpse. Felt like a good solution. The only thing I couldn't let go of was her. My Chloe. How could I bear to leave her? In the whole world, we were all each other had. I checked myself into the hospital. I was mainly afraid I'd die somewhere alone and my corneas wouldn't be viable by the time they found me. Before I was admitted, I went to see Chloe's doctor one last time. He told me that Chloe had been refusing the transplant, worried about the cost, and just wanted to go home. But last night, she had finally agreed. I made him promise to keep my donation anonymous. He nodded, his gaze heavy. I will. We are bound by donor confidentiality. With that, I could rest easy. I went up to her floor, wearing a mask and a hat, feeling like a thief in the night. It wasn't really necessary. With her vision the way it was, she wouldn't have been able to recognize me even if I stood right in front of her. I stood outside her room, watching her through the small window in the door. She was just as I'd left her, standing alone by the window, looking out. Her silhouette looked so lonely and sad. My hand brushed against the door, making a soft sound. She whipped her head around, a hopeful cry on her lips. Ethan, is that you? Tears streamed from my own eyes as I scrambled to hide out of sight. The only answer was the normal, bustling sound of the hospital hallway. After a long moment, realizing no one was there, she slowly sank to the floor, wrapped her arms around her knees, and began to sob. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I repeated the words to her 1,000 times in my heart. I was only just discovering that hurting her was so much harder than loving her. Chloe, I hope that after you cry this out, you can forget me quickly. After all, a monster who would abandon you when you needed him most isn't worth another thought. You just go and start your new life, and I will fade away into the dust of your memories. The pain was getting worse, so bad that my thoughts started to blur. The doctor prescribed me painkillers, but I gave them to the patient in the next room who had the same diagnosis. Before, I hadn't wanted to die. I wanted to stay with Chloe, but now I just wanted it to be over as quickly as possible so she could have my corneas. Perhaps because I had no will to live, my body weakened visibly day by day, until all I could do was lie in bed and listen to the sound of my own ragged breaths. Then one day, for some reason, I suddenly felt much better. The pain seemed to have lessened, and I even felt hungry. I told the nurse I'd like some chicken noodle soup. He looked at me with such pity in his eyes. He went to the cafeteria and brought me the soup and some scrambled eggs too, and he watched as I ate every last bite. He asked if I wanted anything else. I shook my head and told him I was tired and wanted to sleep for a while. He lowered my bed and drew the curtains. You get some rest, he said. I'll be right here. Just call me if you need anything when you wake up. I said, okay. A moment later, I fell into a deep sleep. In my dream, my body felt incredibly light. I guess the soup and eggs had given me some strength. But that wasn't right. Chloe was still waiting to see again. The pain in my body was fading, and my mind felt clearer than it had in months. I saw myself at 20 and Chloe at 17. Snowflakes were swirling down, landing softly on both of us. The girl's face was flushed from the cold. She grabbed my arm to stop me and stood in front of me. Ethan, tell me, what did you just say? I didn't say anything. You must have imagined it. No, I heard you. What? Ethan, yeah, I love you too. The boy froze, and the grocery bag he was holding slipped from his hand, spilling onto the snowy ground. A gust of cold wind blew past, ruffling the girl's hair. She shivered, and the boy pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. It was so good. Let it end here. Let this be the last scene. A sharp, piercing alarm from a machine somewhere nearby shattered my dream. There were voices all around, so loud. Thankfully, it only lasted for a moment. And then, gradually, all the sounds faded away. The image in my mind began to fade, too, leaving only a vast, empty nothingness.